Hi and welcome to challenge number 5 of this series. In this one, our task is to replace substring. So we're given an input, for example, programming, and we are asked to replace a certain character that exists within that input with something that we want to replace. So if we take a look at this programming, we have two m's in there, and if we replace them with hyphens, this is the output that we're going to end up with. So we need to have this output for this input if our replacement string is a hyphen. The first language that I'm going to jump in and I'm going to solve this is going to be JavaScript. But much like any other of our challenges, we first need to understand what the challenge is and if that specific language has some sort of a method that is going to help us abstract away the complexity of the challenge so we can get to the solution quickly and more efficiently. But first, we need to store our input string somewhere. I'm going to call this input stir, and this is basically programming. This could be anything. This is just a test. This is just an example. And then what do we want to replace? We want to replace, let's call this to replace. We want to replace m. You could grab any of the letters from the string and replace it. This is just an example. We want to replace m. Now, what do we want to replace it with? That is going to be replacement. And in this scenario, this is just going to be a hyphen. Now, in JavaScript, we have a method on a string. So if I grab my input stir, if I hit the dot, there is a method here that is going to be called, that is called replace all. And if I take a look at the syntax for this replace all, we're going to see that it says it replaces all instances of a substring in a string using a regular expression or a search string. Now, we're not going to pass in a regular expression. We're going to pass in a search string. Now, what it wants is, what do you want to replace? That's going to be our to replace. And what do you want to replace it with? That's going to be our replacement. Now, in here, you don't need to have created to replace and replacement variables. You can just pass m and hyphen right here. But I think this is like a more cleaner way for us to come up with the solution. Now, I need to store this somewhere so I can print it to the console. Let's say this is going to be our subster, and let's log it to the console. Subster. Let's save this, and now to be able to run this, let's first navigate to this directory 005, and then let's clear this. I'm going to say note and then the name of this file. Let's hit enter. There we go. We got programming. And we could just replace this with anything. We also have two R's in the programming. Let's check it for that as well. And there we go. So we can see it works. Now, this is done for JavaScript. You know that the solution that you have for JavaScript, that's going to work almost all the times for TypeScript as well. But this method that we have here, replace all, we have some sort of method like this for Python, for Go, and for Rust as well. So essentially, the solution for all these 5 languages, technically that's going to be the same thing. But I want to change that for TypeScript. And the reason for that is I don't want the TypeScript code to look like the JavaScript one. That's reason one. And the second reason is I want to show you how this replace all actually works. How does it work? And I want to show it to you in the context of actually recreating this replace all. And I'm going to call it a custom replace all. And then I'm going to show you how this actually works. There are going to be some similarities, of course, like these 3. So I could just copy them, put them right here. And in front of these, I could say their type is string, just to make sure that it looks like a TypeScript file. Now, here I'm going to create a function. I'm going to call it custom replace all. And the reason that I'm doing this is because I want to show you how replace all works. And if you were to deconstruct it, this is how it would look like. So let's move forward. This function is going to accept a string, which is going to be our input string. The type of this is going to be string. This is going to accept a search string. That's going to be the to replace. So I'm going to call it search. The type of this is also going to be string. This is also going to accept our replacement. So I'm just going to call it replace. So the names are different. The type of this is also going to be a string. Now, what is this function going to return? That will also be a string in this specific scenario. So what do we want to do here? Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to initialize an empty string because I want to store my result inside of this empty string. All right. And I'm going to call it let result. The type of this is going to be string, but this is going to be an empty string for now. And I also want to initialize a number that is going to count the indices of any input string that we pass in here. And I'm going to call it I because I'm counting the indices, but the initial index is going to be 0 because indices start with 0, right? So that's there. Now we need to have some sort of a loop to take a look at our string and to iterate over its characters. And in each iteration, it basically selects one individual character. And what does it do with that individual character is what we define within that loop. And in here, instead of a for loop, I'm just going to use a while loop. I don't believe we have used any of these while loops inside of these up so far in our challenges. So let's just use it. And I'm going to basically continue looping as long as we have not reached the end of the string. So I'm going to say I continue loop as long as we have not reached the end of our input string. So here is our while loop. What do we want to do in here? We want to check a certain condition. So if we want to check a condition, we're going to have our if statement in here. What condition is it that we want to check? We want to check first if the search result, the search string, is existing within our input string. Now keep in mind here we have actually changed these names. So this stir, this is our input string, and this search is the string that we're looking for, and the replace is the string that we're going to replace with that search one. So first we need to handle that condition if it exists. So for that one, we're going to say stir, and then I'm going to say dot substring. This method is basically going to extract a substring from a string. But keep in mind, this is going to accept two things. It is going to accept a starting index, and then it's going to accept an ending index. The starting index always is going to be inclusive. It means it's going to include the character that happens at the starting index, but the ending index is going to be exclusive. So start index, this is let's just do this. This is inclusive, and then we have exclusive. We have the ending index, which is exclusive. So the starting index is always going to be I, but the ending index is going to be the number of characters that we're looking for. Now keep in mind, in this specific task, we are looking for one character, and we replace it with, it doesn't matter how many characters, but our search criteria is for one character only. Now that you know what I is, that's going to be our starting index. What about our ending index? So we want to start at one character, but then we don't want to jump two characters because again, we're looking for one character. It doesn't matter how many characters we replace it with, but our searching criteria is always going to be one character. And the character length, when it is 1, it's of course 1. So I can say I plus search the length. I'm not going to hard code it. I'm just going to pass it here. Now this substring, it has a starting index and then it has an ending index. The ending index is always going to be 1 plus the starting index. It's going to be like this, I plus 1. So if I is 0, that's going to be the starting index. That's going to be the first letter. I plus 1 is the second letter, but since it's not exclusive, we're just selecting the first letter, which has an index of 0. I hope that makes sense. So that's basically what we do. Now, what we get from this, we check it if that exists or if that's the same as our search. So I'm looking for M. Does M exist in programming? Yes, it exists 2 times. If that exists, I want to do something here within this block. But if M doesn't exist, for example, Q doesn't exist, then what do I want to do with that? Then I want to do something else with it. Now, of course, we're not checking Q, we're just checking M against all the other characters. Let's just start with M. So we first check M with P. Is M and P, are they the same thing? No, they're not the same. So we jump to the else clause of the if statement. If they're the same, we're going to jump into the if clause. Now, to the first clause right here. Now, if they're the same, what do we want to do? Remember, we created the string result. We want to put it in there. So we want to populate our result. Now, keep in mind, we want to populate the result, but we don't want to override any previous characters that already exist within result. In other words, we want to add on to result. So I'm going to say add on to it, our replace. Now, once we add on to it, we are within the block of this, within the true block of the if statement. But keep in mind, the if statement is within a while loop. So you need to go to the next iteration in order to avoid an infinite loop. How do you go to the next iteration? You need to increment the count of the index by 1 manually. You need to increment it by 1. And how do we do that? We have already done that right here. So I'm just going to copy this, put it down here, but this is not going to work because we need to increment it by 1 and then assign that value to I as well. What is the assignment operator? That's right there, and there we go. So the if statement part is done. I hope it's clear. If it's not, you can always rewind it and watch it and just think about it, and I'm sure it's going to click. Now, what if the characters don't match? M doesn't match with P, with R, with O, with G. It doesn't match. What do we want to do in that scenario? Well, in that scenario, we just want to pass in that match, that not so match inside of our result anyway. We want to just populate it with that. Because if we take a look at our output string, it contains all the strings that match and all the strings that do not match. So in the else clause, we pass in the characters of the string that do not match. Even if they do not match, we still want it to be within our result. We still want it to be there. So we grab our result. Now keep in mind, we don't want to override the previous entries within the result. We just want to add on to it. That's why we say plus equality. We want to add on to it. What do we want to add on to it? We want to add on to it our input string and all the iterations using our I, because I is actually the loop agent which iterates. We want to pass it on to our result. Now keep in mind, we need to increment the count in order to not end up with an infinite loop. So in here, I can just say I plus plus. And that's going to be it. So let's say, what do we want to do? We want to return from this function the result. And the only thing else for us is to basically go ahead and call this. So in here, I could say const, what did I call this? In here, I said subster. Yeah, I could just say subster. And this is going to have a type of string. And this is going to be, let's call our custom replace all. Now, the first parameter that's going to accept is our input string. So I'm going to pass an input string. The second argument is our search, which is to replace. The third one is our replacement string itself. And now let's just call this subster. Let's log it. Let's save this. Whoops, this should have a type of string. And now let's run this. tsc b replace substring. We got our JS, and I'm going to run our JS. And there we go. We got programming, the same result, right? So what I could do is I could change this with R, save this, and run that, and then run this, and there we go. So TypeScript version also works. Let's jump into the Python version. So for Python, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to grab our input string, put it right here. And then I'm going to say to replace. I'm going to try to keep these names the same. Let's say our first attempt is going to be M. And after that, we're going to have replacement. This is going to be a hyphen. Now, we need to grab our input string, and there is actually a method on this that's going to be replace. Replace is going to accept to replace the string that we want to replace and its replacement as well. And in here, I could store this within a variable, and I could call it substr, and let's print substr. Whoops. Print substr. Let's save that. I'm going to say Python C. Let's run it. There we go. We got programming. And now I'm going to change it with R. Run this again. And we got programming as well. Very good. We clear the terminal. So the Python solution is done. We could come up with something like this in Go as well. So the first thing in Go is we need to import our main package, and let's grab the entry point for this application, our main function. Now, again, we need to have our 3 variables. And since this looks a lot like our JavaScript one, I could just copy these, put them right here just to save you some time, get rid of these initializers. Now, for these, I'm just going to use short variable declaration. Let's save that. There we go. And we have our substr. Now, in Go, the replace method for us to replace the substring doesn't exist on individual strings, but it exists on the strings package, and on there we have this replace all, and make sure you import the package as well. Now in here you need to pass in your input string, the string you want to replace, and its replacement as well. And that should be it. Let's grab our fmt print line, and I'm going to pass in substr. Let's save that. And we should add the colon because that is a short variable declaration. I'm going to say go run d hyphen replace substring.go. Let's run it. It's going to take a couple of seconds. There we go. We just ran it. I'm going to change this with M, save it, and I'm going to run it again. And there we go. It works. Now that the Go solution is done, let's jump into our Rust, which is the final attempt for this challenge. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select our main function, the entry point for this application. The variable declarations for Rust are going to look a lot like Python, so I'm just going to put them here, but we need our initializer, much like JavaScript, and I'm going to pass in a let. Now in here, I'm not going to use own strings. I'm going to use string slices because I don't want to overcomplicate this. Let's save this. Make sure you terminate all of these. And what do I want to do next is, first, let me just make sure this is perfect. Now, we want to take a look at if this language has a method that is going to be able to help us replace all of these strings. And yes, it does. And it's called replace. So I'm going to grab my input string, and on there's going to be a method that's going to be replace. And this method is going to accept to replace. What do I want to replace? And what do I want to replace it with? And after that, I am going to store this inside of this substring and initialize this as well. Make sure you terminate this line. And after that, the only thing remaining is for us to print it. So print line. This is going to be our macro. Now, since we're printing strings, we don't need our debug mode. We can just get away with our display. And I'm going to pass in our substring, terminate this as well. And let's say Rust C. File name is E. I'm hitting E. I'm writing E hyphen and hitting tab. It's going to autocomplete it for me. There we go. And now let's just run this file. And there we go. We got our programming. Now I'm going to change this M with R. much like the other languages, and we're going to take a look at that as well. And let's run the executable, and there we go. So that is it for this challenge. I hope you enjoyed it. I really tried to explain the TypeScript version really simply, but this just goes to show you how much these methods that are available on strings, how much they abstract away the complication of code. But what happens really underneath is something that you need to understand, because if your code doesn't work, you should be able to debug your code. So with this, our 5th challenge has come to an end. See you in the next one.